as they were in sight, Mordud employed
First Crusade. Yeah, different angle here. You know, I find it weird because whenever I'm recording from my other angle,
in our previous episode on the first.
I'm gonna just skip all this, but like my angle always just for some reason it's just like worse. Like the lighting is bad. Like my face is very distorted. But whenever I record from this angle that you're seeing right now, like you could actually see my like I look a lot more presentable. Like my skin doesn't look like black. The lighting is perfect, and it's funny because it's just a different angle. But for some reason, it just completely changes the way how I look. But anyway,
Discord and much more. Thank you for supporting the plans of Muhammad I Tapar. However, this state was more of a loose confederation that the new sultan had to consolidate, as many Atabegs were fully autonomous and pursued their own interests. The two most important examples for our story are the last remaining powerhouses in the Levant, Damascus and Aleppo. They too saw a major shift in policy after Dukak of Damascus died of tuberculosis in 1104. And here once again we are reminded of how important it is to have a healthy heir of age, as one of his officers, Togtekin, took the opportunity to rise above his station by deposing his junior son Tutush II, exiling his brother, and marrying his widowed wife. In one swift move, Togtekin founded the Burid dynasty, which would rule the city for 50 years. This new change could potentially mean an end to the Damascus-Aleppo rivalry, but in reality their relationship became even tenser.
I'm just so happy that we're finally at the end of the first crusade. We could finally do the second crusade, because originally that's what I was doing. Second crusade. Oh my gosh. But then people was like, no, do the first one. And then I was like, wait a minute, I should do the first one. What am I doing?
In 1105, the final link between the Crusaders and Byzantines was broken, as Raymond of Toulouse died from injuries he sustained while laying siege to Tripoli. Alexios had made a substantial investment, making him a vassal and allowing him to carve up Tripoli for himself, while maintaining an imperial claim over it and the rest of the region. Raymond was succeeded by his 2-year-old son Alfonso, but once again his nephew, William II Jordan, Count of Sardinia, took his chance and seized control. Raymond was the richest of all the Crusaders, who supplied the most amount of resources as well as the engineers who managed to turn the tide in multiple sieges. But on his deathbed, his dream of establishing a foothold in the Holy Land was unfulfilled.
No!
Whether he knew about the change in power or not, the Emir of Aleppo, Ridwan, assembled an army aimed at relieving Tripoli after the Qadi ruling the city called to his aid. But on his way there, he was notified of another development. The city of Arta, which had rebelled against Tancred, sided with Aleppo and expelled the city's garrison, was now under siege. Ridwan marched towards the city, and once the Crusader camp was in range, he ordered a full-scale attack. The Crusaders retreated, abandoning their camp, but while the enemy had already resorted to looting, they were set upon by a greater force. Apparently, after witnessing the feigned retreat maneuver so many times, the Crusaders decided to employ it, and did it to great effect. The numbers of participants in the Battle of Arta are exaggerated, but what we know for sure is that the majority of Ridwan's untrained infantry was slaughtered after the Frankish cavalry dominated their Seljuk counterparts, leaving the flanks exposed. Tancred and his men proceeded to chase down their foes all the way to Aleppo, looting the countryside as they went. Would remain in power for another 8 years, but after this engagement he would no longer be a threat to the Crusaders. The Principality of Antioch was secured, but to the south, the Kingdom of Jerusalem was facing a far greater foe. The Fatimids were hoping to settle the score and break the Ramla tie that same year. For the 5th year in a row, a large army, between 10 and 12,000, was assembled and marched against the crucial point between Ascalon and Jerusalem. However, this time, they were supported by a strong contingent of Seljuk horse archers, in a rare moment of collaboration between the two states. The Fatimids made Baldwin bleed 3 years prior, and now wanted to finish the job with the biggest army since Ascalon. Sadly, for those of us who enjoy sophisticated formations and exciting battles, this would prove to be yet another disappointment. By this point, these continuous engagements were becoming part of everyday life in the Levant, and the chroniclers spare very few words for this engagement that raged on for almost a day. What we do know is that Baldwin took charge of a far smaller force, repelled an attack from the rear, then came back and led a final charge that broke the enemy. The Egyptian camp was looted, and the Third Battle of Ramla was won. To their credit, the Fatimids were not a weak opponent, nor did they lack the will or the means to crush the Latins. Between 1099 and 1118, they launched major invasions that included naval support in 1099, 1101, 1102, 1103, 1105 and 1118, with smaller raiding parties sent out in 1104, 1106, 1107, 1108, 1110, 1111, 1113 and 1115. This means that in 19 years, the Kingdom of Jerusalem had to fight off at least 14 assaults, while laying siege to multiple cities, dealing with internal disputes, Italian merchant cities, Byzantines and the Seljuks. Keep in mind that after Ascalon, the Crusaders never fielded more than 1,000 knights. Usually, their army consisted of around 500, supported by a few thousand infantry and archers.
You know, honestly, it sounds small. It sounds small, but guys, to put this into better perspective, at least for me, I could actually understand like how big that truly is. Because Barbados has I think the world's smallest army. I'm pretty sure Barbados has the world's smallest army. Last time I checked, I think they said no. Barbados was very close to it, but it's still in the top 10 of world's smallest armies. I don't know the recent data. Last time I checked, hit my table there in accident. Last time I checked, that was like 5 years ago. But yeah, it's like nothing hasn't really changed, of course. So the Barbadian Defense Force, I believe, has 800 to 1,000 members in it, if I'm not mistaken. Last time I checked, I'm trying to remember right now. And it's small. It's very small, right? Oh my goodness. I'm like, what the heck is the point of having a defensive force? But the thing is the Barbados Defense Force, it's aligned with the Royal Anglican, I forgot what, Royal Anglican Regiment or something like that. It's aligned with, originally it was like a part of the British Army back when Barbados was a colony, because that's when it was actually created. It wasn't even created after independence. But then, when Barbados got independence, it wasn't like in the British Army anymore, but because we still had the monarchy until 2021, it was still like aligned with, in fact, actually, it's like a clone regiment of the Royal Anglican Regiment. I'm pretty sure it's a clone of that. I could be wrong, but it is literally a carbon footprint copy of a regiment in the British Army that is still very much aligned with it. It's such a weird relationship because it's like, yeah, Barbados is like its own country and whatnot, but it's still like closely linked with England in a lot of things. A lot of people don't really know that, actually. a lot of which is like in the military. And they do parades all the time. They do parades a lot, actually. The military in Barbados. Oh yeah, they do a lot of parades. They love doing that shit. Which is actually where my flag comes from. The YouTube logo of this channel, it's literally from the Barbados Defense Force, because that's originally how Barbados even got that flag. It was the Queen who basically, like, more or less, because the Barbados Defense Force, the Barbados Coast Guard, you have the military, the army, the military, the Air Force. Funny enough, Barbados used to have an Air Force. It was a joke of an Air Force, but it used to be a thing. It doesn't exist anymore. But they plan to get more stuff in the future. I doubt that's gonna happen. But the Coast Guard, if you probably noticed that my logo flag is literally like the naval ensign of the British Royal Navy, except without the Union Jack. It's just the Barbados flag. Again, that's because Barbados's military is closely linked with the UK's military still, despite independence. So basically, because of that, the Queen just basically gave us a localized version of the the naval ensign, right? So that's the whole point. Like, it's supposed to represent independence, but it's also supposed to represent like the British heritage that comes with it, and the fact that Barbados is still somewhat aligned with England. So yeah, that's literally like, because I know nobody really knows where exactly I got that flag from, but yeah, it is the naval ensign of Barbados. Just an example of how closely linked Barbados still is with the UK. But anyways, 1,000 people is honestly a lot. It's honestly a lot, because whenever I see like the Barbados Defense Force do their military parades, and this is why I brought that up, because it's like they'll do parades all the time in the capital, and those parades take a long ass time. I'm like, bro, when is this going to end? Right? So from my perspective, honestly, 1,000 people is honestly a lot. It's honestly a lot. Like, you guys are so used to hearing like 15,000, 100,000, 50,000. And you may think like, oh, okay, that's not really big numbers. But you guys just don't really understand how big those truly are, unless you are in a unique position like me, where you could truly understand, like, okay, that is massive. That is absolutely massive, right? But anyways, let's stop with the rambling.
When compared with data from other campaigns, such as those against the Sultanate of Rum, Byzantines and Seljuks, it is hard to draw a conclusion that disputes how brutally effective the Frankish knights really were. And through this period, the Crusader states were fighting for survival, not dominance, since every city had to be garrisoned, and supply lines were constantly disrupted. One can only imagine how different things could have been if either the alliance with Byzantium was preserved, the Crusade of 1101 featuring 10,000 knights arrived in the Levant, or if Bohemond's crusading force sailed to Antioch instead of Dyrrhachium. Speaking of the Crusade of 1101, the Seljuk Sultan of Rum, Kilij Arslan, had vanquished more Latins than he could count, so he felt secure enough to launch his own campaign against them. His forces initially tried to take Edessa, but after assessing its strong fortifications, he decided to turn on his Danishmend allies. Upon his arrival at Harran, the city surrendered to him, and Diyarbakir quickly followed. These victories emboldened the Sultan. From his perspective, everyone around him was falling apart, so when he was presented with an opportunity to expand his domain even further by taking control of Mosul, a key city that recently changed hands after a brutal assassination, he went for it. The Sultanate of Rum did manage to conquer the city, but not for long. The Seljuk Sultan assembled a coalition that featured Ilghazi of the Artukids and Ridwan of Aleppo, who managed to defeat Kilij Arslan in the field. In his attempt to escape, another great figure of the story met his demise as he drowned in a river. To make matters worse, his son Malik Shah was held prisoner at the time, leaving the fate of Anatolia in the balance.
Wow.
Around this time, while Burma was laying siege to Dyrrhachium, Tancred took the opportunity to advance his holdings since the Byzantines were busy defending the Balkans against Burma. And so, in 1108, Tancred assaulted the key cities of Laodicea, Tarsus, Adana and Mamistre, shifting the regional balance of power yet again. As for Alexios, one might assume that fending off a Crusader invasion led by one of the most cunning men in medieval history, who wanted to conquer Constantinople itself, would mean he had his hands full. But as usual, he was one step ahead. Raymond's death was a significant loss.
Transformed
Emperor was willing to go all in and offered rich gifts to both claimants of Tripoli. On the one hand, there was William Jordan, who received and ignored his embassy, but on another, there was Bertrand, Raymond's eldest son, who sailed east on Genoese ships at the head of a 4,000-strong army that raided Thessaly. Normally, this would have been severely punished, but Alexios knew how to turn enemies into allies, so instead, he invited him to the imperial court, where he offered rich gifts instead of an oath of vassalage, which Bertrand accepted. The Provençal then sailed to Antioch, where he met Tancred. The Principality of Antioch had seized some of the lands under Raymond's control, so naturally...
Honestly, bro, yeah. Alexios, you are the diplomatic god. Bro, I think Alexios is like the first person, not like when I say first person, I mean like top 5. He's definitely number 1 in like just his diplomatic skills, bro. It's like he put all of his stats into diplomacy, apparently. Yeah, like a lot of people were saying like, yo, this guy, you need to, like, this guy is like the hype. Now, I didn't really say much about it during the whole Crusade series because I was just paying attention to all the details. But I will say he's smart. This guy probably single-handedly helped make the freaking Roman Empire survive for like a good couple more centuries until the Fourth Crusade honestly just went and essentially undid all of his hard work. So
Bertrand asked for their return. The Norman agreed, but only if the Provençal army helped him against the Byzantines. In a rare show of loyalty to one's word, Bertrand refused, suggesting that they take Gibel from the Seljuks instead, but Tancred was uninterested. Bertrand departed empty-handed and made his way to Tripoli, where he found William's siege camp, and a conflict erupted over succession rights. The situation started to spiral out of control, so outside forces got involved. Baldwin decided to mediate the conflict and offered a resolution where once the city was taken, its lands would be divided equally between them. The two sides begrudgingly agreed, and Bertrand was then made to swear another oath of vassalage, but this time to Baldwin, while William turned to the aid of Tancred, creating a cold proxy war between the Crusader states. Then on July 12, 1109, the Crusaders, supported by the Genoese fleet, made an assault and successfully captured Tripoli. The resistance was strong and many men lost their lives, but most notably, William sustained an injury to which he succumbed in days. Suddenly, Tripoli had only one ruler, who owed his allegiance to both Jerusalem and Constantinople. Unfortunately for Tancred, his sphere of influence was diminished even further after both Jocelyn of Courtenay and Baldwin of Bourg were ransomed in 1107 and 1108. During their absence, Antioch held control over Edessa, but now that they were free, they refused to bend the knee to him, especially since Burma was nowhere to be seen. The two then openly went to war against each other, with Baldwin seeking aid from an Armenian king who supplied him with an army and 300 Pecheneg mercenary riders. These punitive raids caused severe damage to Tancred's lands and angered his subjects, which led to the clergy getting involved. A council was formed, and the prelates ruled in Baldwin's favour, restoring his rights as Count of Edessa, a semi-autonomous Crusader state under the vassalage of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. 4 considerable Crusader victories mark the following year of 1110. First, in the spring, a large army assembled by the Atabeg of Mosul attempted to lay siege to Edessa, but was forced to retreat after King Baldwin arrived with a relief force. Then, after a 2-month blockade, Baldwin, Genoa and Pisa assaulted and brutally sacked Beirut, killing most of its inhabitants. Fatimid ships from Tyre and Sidon tried to break the blockade, but were unsuccessful. Then in October, Baldwin welcomed the first ever European monarch to visit the Crusader states, King Sigurd I of Norway, whose incredible adventure story deserves its own video that we hope to make in the future. After stopping by England, Iberia and Sicily, the Norwegian king finished his pilgrimage by praying in Jerusalem, bathing in the River Jordan, and laying siege to Sidon. This time, however, the Fatimid fleet nearly broke their navy, but a last-minute action by a Venetian squadron under Doge Faliero saved the expedition. Sidon fell on December 4th after surrendering to Baldwin. And then, finally, Tancred led his own assault against the castle that would end up becoming Crac de Chevalier, solidifying his domain. By this point, Burmour had signed the Treaty of Devil, but did nothing to enforce it. Alexios offered him an annual salary of 200 gold pounds, the title of Sebastos, and a generous amount of land, as long as he held them in his name, but the Norman didn't even write a letter to Tancred. Alexios opened Pandora's box, and was now willing to do anything to close it. So he started writing letters and sending gifts. In 1110, the Pisans were approached and offered not just an end to hostilities, but special trading privileges, similar to the ones he granted to the Venetians. Normally, merchants had to pay a 10% tax, and while the 4% he offered wasn't as good as the 0% Venice paid, it was still a bargain. Additionally, Pisa would receive yearly payments from the empire, special legal rights, titles, and lucrative trade opportunities. In return, the merchant city agreed to become a Byzantine vassal and assist them in war. The treaty that both sides signed has survived and illustrates many important points.
Wow, it's
Nor
still...
will
What?
we, inhabitants of the city and land of Pisa, combine with any other person or people at enmity with you for the purpose of taking from you your empire, whether Romania or any other lands or islands which you hold under your imperial power, now or from this time forth, in Croatia, Dalmatia or Dyrrachium, as far as Alexandria itself. Note that Alexios was not simply interested in reclaiming Anatolia and Antioch. His ultimate goal was a full restoration of the Eastern Roman Empire. To get there, he signed a deal with the same state that pillaged his trade ports and assisted his enemies. But why did the emperor choose Pisa over Genoa, alienating his Venetian allies? The wording of this treaty, and what followed after, reveals that Alexios was planning a massive invasion of the Crusader states. And since the Pisan archbishop was exiled from his post in Jerusalem, they made the ideal ally. The negotiations stalled, and the Byzantine royal decree affirming the new rights was only issued in late 1111, after Lombard, Genoese and Pisan ships raided the Dardanelles. Another indication of Alexios' ambitions was his embassy to the Pope. The emperor expressed his sympathy and spoke harshly against the Holy Roman Emperor Henry V, who openly threatened the papacy, offering Byzantine troops to guard the Eternal City. He even suggested the possibility of a church union and an end to the schism. The Pope, however, wasn't interested. The next correspondence is based on slim evidence, but some records show that Alexios sent letters to the Sultan in Baghdad, incentivizing him to attack the Crusader states. In the meantime, the most serious diplomatic work was entrusted to the general Butimites, who in 1111 sailed to Cyprus with a fleet of 12 ships laden with supplies and gold. His first stop was Tripoli, where Bertrand welcomed him and provided storage for the vast treasury. He reaffirmed his oath to Alexios and was ready to go to war with him, provided that he arrived personally at the gates of Antioch. Once word got out, Baldwin called Butimites and began negotiating with him. The idea was to form a coalition against Antioch, one which the king of Jerusalem was willing to join, but only after Alexios gave him a large quantity of gold and provided naval support. Giving so many resources to a potential enemy while receiving nothing seemed more like a scam than a bad deal, so talks continued for almost a year without progress. During that same period, Butimites approached Jocelyn of Courtenay with the same idea, but he
this man, what is going on here? What is going on, Alexios, bro? What are you cooking, bro?
refused. By this point it was 1112, and the ruler of Tripoli died, leaving his 14-year-old son Pont as the Count of Tripoli. Yet again, a regency complicated things, and upon his return, when Butimites asked to access his treasury, the local bishop refused him. Suddenly there was a standoff. Despite threatening to cut off the grain trade for Cyprus, the money was never returned. Instead, the council sent Pont to Antioch so that Tancred could become his mentor, and that the relations between the two Crusader states could be mended. The following year, not only did Butimites return empty-handed, but the Venetians showcased their resentment of the Byzantine deal with Pisa by requesting aid for their invasion of Dalmatia. Despite affirming his claim over the region, Alexios begrudgingly agreed, but managed to stall and delay the potential invasion for another day. The emperor was an old man, and with Malik Shah free from captivity, major raids in Anatolia continued to threaten his rear. The clock was ticking, and their diplomacy was starting to prove inefficient.
Yeah, Alexios, come on, man.
Either due to the Byzantines' machinations or pure coincidence, in 1111, every single Crusader state rallied together and stood firm against a massive expedition launched by the Seljuk Sultan Tapar. What was possibly the first jihad against the Crusader states was led by the new Atibeg of Mosul, Mordud. With him were the emirs of Alat and Hamadan. At first, the army marched against Edessa, but yet again
shit. Oh, okay, this is getting...
found itself incapable of capturing the formidable fortress. Then they moved against Turbessel, led by Jocelyn of Courtenay, and besieged it. Lines were drawn and the defenders were tested. Before long, sickness began spreading throughout the siege camps, and the Emir of Alat succumbed to illness. Almost immediately his followers left the army, while the Emir of Hamadan also abandoned Mordud, hoping to gain Alat for himself. But before the diminished army could make their final assault, a messenger from Aleppo requested assistance against the Crusaders, who were on the verge of retaking the city. When Mordud got there, he was surprised to find that there were no Crusaders to speak of. Worse still, Ridwan refused to open his gates. Instead, the army of Damascus, led by Toghtekin, who also answered the call, joined the main host, giving it a much-needed boost.
Huh? What?
By this point, the Crusaders were able to unite their forces, as Tancred, King Baldwin, Count Bertrand of Tripoli and Count Baldwin of Edessa merged their armies and marched against the enemy near Shaizar. As soon as they were in sight, Mordud employed the traditional skirmishing tactics, sending wave after wave of horse archers to harass the Crusaders. But after years spent fighting the Seljuks, the Crusader resolve prevailed, and they refused to give chase, instead blocking their arrows and establishing a defensive perimeter. Small-scale charges were utilized only if the enemy got too close, and never over...
Wait, so they finally found a way to patch that method? Oh my gosh, this is like the first time I have ever seen somebody find a way to patch that method.
The battle became a standoff. Day after day, the Crusaders held the line, despite the harassment. The Seljuks waited for opportune moments to attack them, like when the knights were watering their horses by the Orontes River. After 2 weeks, with supplies running low, Baldwin gave the order, and the Crusaders fell back to Apamea. Even during their withdrawal, Every contingent of the Crusaders held the formation until the Seljuk soldiers were completely demoralized. With 2 major contingents abandoning the army and after gaining absolutely no spoils, the warriors refused to follow their commander, and the Seljuks accepted defeat as they pulled back.
Wow.
The Battle of Shaizar was a clear message to the Crusaders' enemies. Despite their rivalries, low numbers, and limited resources, the Crusaders preferred Latin neighbors to Islamic or Byzantine ones, and they were here to stay. In the next episode, we will
Asserting dominance.
conclude our series on the First Crusade, so make sure to subscribe and press the bell button to see it. Recently, we have started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member exclusive videos. Join the ranks of patrons and YouTube members via the
Alright, that is the end. Alright, if you've made it all the way to the end of this video and you're new to my channel, make sure you subscribe for more content like this. First Crusade, we're finally getting to the end of it. Then it's gonna be the Second Crusade. Definitely gonna be doing all the Crusades in chronological order. Definitely. So yeah, man, definitely, if you like my reactions, man, make sure to stay tuned for that. This one was a bit light. You know, it's like getting towards the end of the First Crusade, so I'm not really surprised that this one's a bit light, of course. But anyways, man, make sure you check out my other videos on my channel. If you have any suggestions like this, you can always comment it in the comments below. And check out my channel membership too, guys. You know, my active viewers, if you're an active viewer of mine, you know, a lot of people, when I got in that car accident, I got that concussion, I stopped uploading, a lot of people were confused. Like, what happened to me? Where did I go? Somebody thought that I was going to stop uploading completely, but my channel members were completely updated, like the latest, okay? You know, so when you're a channel member, your comments have more priority, reply, your video suggestions are done much more quicker, you get more insight on what's going on with me. This is why I always encourage my active viewers to become a channel member, and it's only 99 cents a month, man. So with all that being said, man, thank you for watching and goodbye.